Hey there, everybody. How are you this evening? I am Dr. Deb, and I hope this week you can hear me because I plugged in my microphone, which was the problem last time, but I checked the computer and it should be working. So please tell me if you don't hear me. And tell me if you do hear me. Let's put it that way. I don't want to laugh. I don't want to sound like somebody who laughs too much. Anyway, tonight's talk is called When Everything You Bring Up Triggers Your Spouse. Just want you to know I'm Dr. Deb. If you've joined here for the first time, I wrote the book, The Healing is Mutual: Tools to Build Trust and Respect Together. I'm a lover of internal family systems, which was not in the book. It's something I learned in the 14 years since I wrote that book. Ooh, time goes fast. If you're not on my email list, by the way, please go to my website, drdeb.com, to sign up, and then you'll also get a download of a free meditation, Being Your True Self. Okay, let's get on with it. What could be the reason why people get triggered so easily? What could be the reason for that? Well, there's two people in a relationship, right? Let's say there's person A and person B always gets triggered very easily. Well, then the question is person B getting triggered because person A is kind of purposely saying triggering things? See, I mean, it does take two to bargain. So we'll look at both sides of it. If person A says triggering things, then why is that? For example, person B has admitted that they've got a problem with their mother, and person A then brings up, oh, even your mother doesn't like you. That's pretty mean. Or another thing that people do is common word now, gaslighting. People gaslight each other, which means they say something that's not true to confuse the person. So person A might say to person B, I told you I was not going to meet you today, when in fact person A said they were going to meet person B. So person B is waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and feeling really bad when A doesn't show up. That's an example, a silly example perhaps, but if people have a lifetime relationship like that, it doesn't come out very good. Okay, so it is possible that person A is just a mean person who purposely goes out of their way to hurt, abuse, and trigger person B. Possible. But then there's another possibility altogether, and that's what I want to focus on next. Maybe person A's stuff is perfectly normal, the way they speak, and person B is triggered by those things. And I gave 3 examples in the post that I had in my email today. One example is a person simply inquiring, what do you feel about that? Like they go to the movies, right? They see a movie. Well, how do you feel? Well, how did it strike you? What are your emotions? Normally, person B would not get disturbed or triggered by that, but sometimes person B does. Or another case, a parent gets a little bit loud in disciplining the kids, and person B says, oh, you're too loud. I don't like you doing that to the kids. And person A is, well, okay, but they need to know I'm serious sometimes. I don't yell day and night. I'm a pretty calm person, but sometimes they need a strong hand, and you're not the one that's going to yell. You never yell. So I have to yell. What's wrong with that? Or example 3, person B, the one that gets triggered, says, gee whiz, I can't take it when you get emotional. It just makes my heart pound. You're too excited. And person A is, well, this election is pretty exciting, contentious, has a lot of feelings that it evokes in me, and I can't help it if I'm passionate. Is person A wrong in any of these scenarios? You tell me, guys, is person A wrong? Or is person B somehow overreacting? And I don't like the term overreacting, just like I don't like the term hypersensitive, because the truth is that person B may have had a history of trauma, and trauma will sensitize a person. Trauma will cause a person who wouldn't have otherwise reacted that way to be very sensitive to certain triggers. Now, let's define trauma. What is trauma? There are 2 going definitions, and there's one that I like and there's one I don't like, and I'm going to share the both of them with you. But the first one, pay attention, hang on, be patient, is a few sentences long, or one really long run-on sentence. I'll tell you why. Trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. This is from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration of our government, in the Trauma and Justice Strategic Initiative. And it was written in 2012. Why do I like this? You'd have to be doing this day and night to realize the slight difference. When you open up the second source of definition for trauma, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, what you get is that trauma comes from a feeling of threat to your life, or observing a threat to someone's life. In other words, the word emotional ain't in there. And the word harmful is not the same as a threat to your life. Harmful or threatening is in this definition, not the DSM definition. And I prefer this definition because it is more encompassing and more accurate. The reality is that people who have experienced trauma means that they have experienced something that is emotionally harmful, even if it's not threatening, and even if it's not physically harmful. That doesn't mean that physical isn't part of it. It encompasses both. That's why this is a very good definition and recognizes the truth. In fact, the SAMHSA definition even includes spiritual well-being. How about that? Because your spirit is your feeling of joie de vivre, enjoying life, getting meaning out of life, feeling good about it. That is your spirit. So that's part of living. It should be part of living. If that part of you has been somehow blunted by trauma or heightened by trauma, in other words, your feelings are so heightened you can't have a beautiful, relaxed, spiritual relationship with the world around you, then you have been suffering from the results of trauma. Now, what does that really mean in terms of triggers? Trauma means that something that happened in the past happens all over again in the present. Well, how could that be? The answer is that it's not the same exact thing. If it turned out that your mother yelled and your wife now yells, it's not the same thing. They're different people and different circumstances, but it's the yelling that makes you feel that way. I remember going through a period of time when the bell would ring back where I was living in Florida, and it was not a good reason. We got bad news every time the bell rang. And it took a while for an ordinary bell ringing to not get me triggered. First, I had to realize what the problem was and why it was. Then I had to tell my little people inside of me, my inner children and inner young ladies, because actually the bell ringing problems happened when I was already an adult. So, young ladies, that it's okay. It doesn't mean anything. And I should enjoy the bell ringing because it's going to bring good things and not bad things, which is exactly what happened. But I had to go through that self-healing experience in order for that to happen and not be triggered by an ordinary thing like a bell ringing. So, one of the things that I hope you're getting out of what I'm saying is this: although trauma is not something that we would consider normal in the sense of good, like a good thing that happens to people as they get older, it is normal in the sense of prevalent. It does happen. And a person's reactions are not dysfunctional. On the absolute contrary, they're very functional. A person's reactions to something that's toxic must be defensive in some way so that they can protect themselves. So if something toxic, which is traumatic, happened in your childhood and something similar triggers you now, it makes total sense that what you'd want to do is prevent that bad feeling that goes with it by reacting. No, no, don't go there. I don't want to hear those noises or the this or the that, the excitement, whatever it is that's causing me to be triggered. I get that. And very frankly, that is not dysfunctional, it's functional. Is it good? No. Does it work anymore? No, it doesn't help you anymore. That's the problem with it. That's why people got into the lazy habit of calling it dysfunctional, because it's not functioning anymore. It was functioning to protect you. But see, right now, the one it's functioning to protect is your inner kid, the kid inside of you. I told a mother who gets very, very triggered by her daughter being upset that it's really her own little girl that she needs to calm first. And when she calms her own little girl, then she can take care of her daughter in an adult motherly way rather than reacting like as if she was still that little girl to another little girl, because she's now a grown up. So it seems to some observers like it's dysfunctional because it's not actually functioning today. But it wasn't dysfunctional when it started. And that's the key. The problem isn't that it's dysfunctional. The problem is that you've hung on to it too long. But what did you know? Whoever the person is that's triggered. You didn't realize. We all get triggered by stuff. We didn't realize. That's all. We have to figure out what the cause was and speak to our inner children or inner adults, depending on when this all started. So then some people will say to me, wait a minute, Dr. Deb. I grew up in a very toxic environment myself. My mother was this and my father was that. And I don't act like that. Okay, there's an answer. It's actually a formula, mathematical, that I created. And it goes like this: the length of trauma, the number of weeks, months, years that a person experienced trauma, and or the ability to do reality testing, meaning some other person was there in your life and said, well, actually, that behavior is wrong. Something, a TV show that said that behavior is wrong. This kind of broadcast online saying the traumatic behavior, the trauma causing behavior was wrong. Something to be able to do reality testing, and or a source of support, emotional support for the child. Someone saying, you're okay. You really are okay. You're a good kid. Those three factors, the degree of them will tell the degree of triggering that the person gets later on. Again, length of trauma, reality testing, and support will affect how badly traumatized you are and how badly triggered you will get later. So, as a story I once read that made a very profound impression on me, I may have told it before. If you've heard it before, forgive me. A person goes to their grandparents for 2 weeks in the summer. This kid has been abused 365 days minus those 2 weeks. You do the math. Every day has been physical and mental abuse. Now, that kid could be crazy from that. Instead, the 2 weeks in the summer gave her reality testing. She was not given, oh, you poor sweet, none of that, unfortunately. But she got reality testing because she was treated with respect, kindness, and no abuse. Would you like some breakfast? There's scrambled eggs and toast. You know, simple like that. Sure, help yourself. Polite, respectful. The cows need to be milked. I think it was a farm. Okay, Grandma, I'll do it after I eat. Sure, no problem. It wasn't soft and fuzzy, but it was reality testing of being treated with respect versus not being treated with respect. And that alone provided sanity to this girl who grew up to become a very healthy, grounded individual. And she wrote about it in something I read somewhere. So that's where that came from. So then the question is, we get back to person A, who isn't intending to be triggering. How is person A supposed to be real? Can person A be emotional if person B gets triggered? Can person A yell at the kids if person B gets triggered? Can person A ask how you feel if person B gets triggered? And it's a very, very hard thing to answer when you're just starting out. So when people come to me for therapy, there's a kind of a developmental progression. Just like kids grow, they get taller. You didn't see little Jimmy since last year. Oh, you grew. Yeah. So there's a development too in therapy where the people coming in have more and more insight, more and more self-love, more and more awareness of what they're doing and how what their partner does reacts on them. They have more of all those things over time. So the more they can dip their toes deeper into the water, the more their partner is able to be real and express themselves. But it's not that simple. That's not that simple. Because the truth is that most people who find each other in a marriage are having some of the same challenges and difficulties. Maybe not exactly identical, but some stuff in common. It's amazing how much in common. Because when people find each other, I believe that at a deep soul level, they find somebody who shares something with them, even if it's a wound, that they can both relate to. The problem is that because both are wounded, it takes a lot of tact and care for the other person in order to say things that are not going to get you in trouble and hurt the other person. But if you're wounded and suffering, you can't start thinking about the other person and what they need because you have needs. How do you manage all that? How do you manage and juggle your emotional needs to express yourself honestly with knowing that the other person can't hear it? And yet, the same thing happens in reverse. They need to say something that maybe you can't hear. How do you do that? This is the reason why number one, I believe in therapy, because I don't think it's really possible for hurt people to navigate that so easily and do it well. Because what I do, for example, very frankly, I don't do couples work together in one room when two people have been pretty severely traumatized by their histories. And then they came together and they kept hurting each other inadvertently, but they did. So I separate them. That's number one. But even so, there should be the ability to talk. And let's face it, you see me for one session and you go home for the rest of the day. There's 8 hours in a day. Well, when you're not sleeping and working 24. So I feel that the most important thing each person can do is just remember there is another person there. It's not all about me. No matter how hurt you are, no matter how fragile you are, no matter how deep and painful your wounds are, each person must tiptoe carefully into revealing their feelings and asking in return for the kind of behavior that they want to see carefully. Because just as person B telling person A, no, don't be so emotional, takes care of themselves, it wounds person A, who may need to be emotional. And just as person A feels they need to be emotional, it will wound person B. So each person really cannot succeed in this game without thinking and being aware of the other person's needs. And you very slowly tiptoe into revealing more and more of your true self. But in the beginning, you may have to hold back just a little bit in order to safeguard the relationship. So it is close to the time. I want to know if there's any questions. If there aren't any questions, I'm just going to recap, but please type in anything. Okay? Recap. People are triggered by trauma, and their trigger reaction is a normal reaction to a toxic event or set of events. And people who were traumatized may do better if the trauma didn't last so long, or if there was some reality testing, or if there was support. The more reality testing, the less long the trauma, the more support, the better the outcome in terms of triggers. So if a person is seriously triggered, you can assume, just looking at the end product, there must have been a lot of trauma with less reality testing and less, if any, support. Another point I made is that I do believe that trauma is an experience that is both emotional as well as physical, and that the emotional part is super important. And in fact, there doesn't even have to be a threat of harm. All there has to be is emotional pain that is given by what is said or the degree to which a person's ignored, any of those things. So the solution is to comfort and heal your inner child. And the way to do that is to first discover what it is that there's a connection between the trigger and your past, and talk to that child literally. You know, we hear voices, we hear a conversation in our head telling us what to do, what to think. We never talk back to it. But in IFS, we do. Internal family systems, we do. We talk back to the parts of us that are giving us trouble so that we can calm them down and take self-leadership. And without therapy, or even with therapy, the most important part of the whole thing is to support each other. Be kind to each other when talking to each other. You know, well, it's true that a person should be able to express their deepest feelings. The reality is that that process of expression should not be one that suffocates other people. One still has to express themselves in a way that other people can tolerate. In fact, there's a word for this in the therapy world, and it's just the level of drama that people have. And the intention of many therapies is to bring that level down. I'm not using all the words. I don't like jargon, but that's what it comes down to. That emotional expression is better when you're calm. Now, the question is, does that mean you're stifling yourself? No, because you can still say, I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, or I don't get that. All of those things are fine. And they're even more fine, it's not a word, better, when you say, part of me is upset, part of me is frustrated, part of me. Because then what you're doing is acknowledging you also have a self, and the self may not be frustrated. Your self itself gets the big picture, loves you, and wants to take care of you. All right, you guys. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you next week.